Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Neville Marriner's most embarrassing recording, his cycle of Beethoven symphonies, neatly reissued by Decca for our, well, let's just say, opprobrium. I mean, this is just bad, 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 bad. And he took 20 years of badness, basically, to make it, which is even more interesting. It was bad over the decades. I can't think of any cycle of Beethoven symphonies that was awaited with less enthusiasm. There's other stuff in here, too, which we'll get to anon. But for the moment, I mean, we have... Okay, it opens. Sometimes it won't open. It's as if it's embarrassed to show itself, but it opened. We get, let's see, also his version of the Grosse Fuge for strings, which is, you cannot imagine. The Consecration of the House and Wellington's Victory, which absolutely defines the term tempest in a teapot. It's absolutely hilarious. So, I mean, that's with the symphonies. And then we'll talk about the other goodies quite shortly. But what I do want to talk about is that I've already seen some reviews of this appearing, and there are basically two ways to review it. There's the bullshit way, and then there's the truth. I propose to tell you the truth, but it's so much fun to talk about the bullshit. The bullshit, as you might expect, is largely coming from the British press, and none less than that gadfly of classical music and king of yellow journalism, Norman Lebrecht. If you want to hear what I consider to be an archetypal English review of this type, I mean, because these were performances, let's just sum it up quickly, of total lack of tension. Completely and totally. They're elegant, they're clean, they are devoid of any sort of Beethovenian enthusiasm, Sturm und Drang, emotional intensity, you name it, it's absent. So let us consider Mr. Lebrecht's review in the Lebrecht Weekly. Ugh, he's got a weekly. Is this in La Scena Musicale or whatever that thing is called? Yes, La Scena Musicale. Whatever. So very interestingly, it has a user rating, this performance or this review. Lebrecht gives it 5 stars. Users give it 2. Ha ha! Well, the users know something, don't they? So here's his review. This is marvelous. The conductor, Sir Neville Marriner, who would have turned 100 next month, was 16 when he was called into the London Symphony Orchestra of violins on the outbreak of the Second World War. He played proms with Henry Wood and, after the war, concerts under Toscanini, Furtwängler, Karajan, Klemperer, Britten, and Pierre Monteux, the last of whom said he would make a good conductor. Well, you can't always get it right. Well, he was a good conductor in certain things. Let's face it, he was. And I've said so many times. Much of what passes for conducting is imitation and as irritation and imitation. Marriner learned from the best. Yeah, okay. That's also true, by the way. None of this has anything to do with his Beethoven, does it? Practical in rehearsal, as unassuming on the night, he was underrated by critics who seek grand gestures or their reward for attendance. Working musicians, by contrast, recognized him as a colleague of uncommon sensitivity and unfailing humanity. The present 1980s set of Beethoven symphonies is proof of his rare combination of responsiveness and personal style. With the self-selecting Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, a bunch of musicians disgruntled with the other London orchestras, Marriner practiced democracy in action and achieved a neat compromise between big band bluster and period instrument theories that pervaded the sector from the 1950s. Listen to his account of the Eroica. This is probably the dullest Eroica ever made by anybody ever in the history of mankind. I am not kidding. Listen to his account of the Eroica, and you will find a refreshing lack of dogmatic leadership. Well, that's exactly true. It's a negative presented as a positive. Lack of leadership. The meaning of the music emerging organically from the logic of the notes. This bullshit means nothing. The Fourth Symphony is, in my view, unsurpassed on record for its lyrical sway. It has lyrical sway. A lack of bombast in the fifth is positively refreshing. Yes, you would never know the finale even happens. And it's completely nondescript. The seventh dances like an old-fashioned ballroom in a nondescript town. That's supposed to be a good thing. You get it? If you want maestro razzle, look elsewhere. Oh, God, I desperately want maestro razzle. Oh, please, maestro razzle. Dazzle me, maestro razzle. This is a Beethoven set to have close to hand, the one to show friends how a tricky phrase should ideally go. Oh, come on. You mean no one else knows how to play a tricky phrase? You know, like Monteur and Karajan and all the people that Marriner worked with, they didn't know how to play a tricky phrase in Beethoven. I mean, how it should go, right? Exactly. If that is not enough to trigger your purchasing finger, the box contains 2 accounts of the violin concerto, one by Mariner's close associate and concertmaster Iona Brown, and the other by the young Gideon Kremer, who plays the outrageously collaged cadenza by the Soviet dissident Alfred Schnittke, so outrageous that I think this is its first appearance on CD. It's not. It was issued on CD. You will need all 10 fingers to count off the sheaf of great concertos that Schnittke references. This Beethoven gift set is not for Christmas. It is for life. To life, l'chaim. Unbelievable. Isn't that just unbelievable? He says nothing positive about it, but presents it as if it's positive. Isn't that amazing? Stunning, really. And that's how it goes with this stuff. I mean, there's more. There's more. I think it would be kind of fun to continue our let's see. Oh, here we go. Let's look at Ted Greenfield's original Gramophone review of let's see. Is that it? Let's see. Yes, he did it. I'm sure he did it. Let's see. Marriner, Beethoven, Eroica. There we go. Yes, here we go. Ted Greenfield reviewed it originally for Gramophone when it was released. And I think it's also interesting to look at that review to see yet another example of the bullshit school of Neville Marriner reviewing back in the day. So here we go. No one could accuse Neville Marriner of excessive haste in recording a Beethoven symphony series with the ASMF, the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. His stylish coupling of numbers 1 and 2 appeared in October 1971. Lebrecht said it all took, in the 1980s. Well, that's not true. The first and second symphony came out much earlier. His account of number 4, coupled with the Grosse Fuge 5 years later, though that element is here. Element? Is that a word? Hang on a minute. I'm absolutely incredibly curious just to know. I've never seen the word element before, and I've seen a lot of words. Element. I'm sure it exists. Element. Quality funny bone ticklers. YouTube element. Element. No. YouTube. There's something on YouTube called element, but there does not seem to be a word. I think maybe they meant elegant. I think it's probably just a typographical error, of which there are several in this review, by the way. Okay, so let's just, who knows what an element is. That reading disappeared from the catalog rather quickly, not helped by its initial issue, by appearing simultaneously with a vivid version from Sir Colin Davis on the same label. Those symphonies, immediately cut out, right? Those symphonies seem a natural part of the ASMF repertory, but the Eroica prima facie is a different matter. It is true that the Collegium Aurum version using original instruments presents a band no bigger than this, but where Marriner and the ASMF shine above all for their refinement and elegance of pointing, elegant pointing. I can point elegantly. Look, I'm pointing. Isn't that elegant? Have you ever seen such elegant pointing in your entire life? Look at me point elegantly. Anyway, their elegant pointing, one might look in vain for an essential ruggedness in this symphony, which in scale and argument leapt so far ahead of its time. The fascinating things is that Marriner's reading does indeed have a lightness, transparency, and resilience of rhythm, typical of the ASMF, but the result is strong and exhilarating. No, it's not. With very fast speeds in the first, third, and fourth movements, actually they're not, which have a shining clarity, hardly if ever sounding breathless. the clarity shines. You polish it up, and it shines. The clear justification is that Marriner has used smaller forces of strings to give a refreshing new look to a much-played work. Oh, here we go. This is the bullshit argument that chamber forces make greater clarity and lightness, which they may or they may not. It depends on the conductor. It depends on the performance. Normally not. Normally, I mean, these are not huge orchestras. You hear everything you're supposed to hear. That's such crap. Anyway, but let's go. In the first movement, clarity, a refreshing new look to a much-played work. That's where we were. In the first movement, the triple time has a dancing quality. It dances, of course. Da-da-da-da, cha-cha-cha-cha, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, come on, please. Thanks to Marriner's rhythmic pointing. There's pointing again. He's pointing with the rhythm, with sharp, clear sforzandos. And though the great dissonance at the climax of the development is not so weighty as we expect it to be, oh, hell no, it has. We don't even know it's happening. We expect it to be. It is illuminating to hear every note cleanly. Yes, you want it clean, limpid. Indeed, there are many places where inner detail emerges with new clarity. Inner detail. Oh, God. Okay, but what about the outer detail? I want outer detail. The funeral march gains least and loses most from the Marriner approach, I'll say. Gee whiz. I mean, but there too, the result is refreshing. I mean, that's what we want, don't we? A refreshing funeral march. We want to come away from the Eroica funeral march feeling as though it never happened at all. That's the idea, right? But it's refreshing. Let's see. Okay, but there too, the result is refreshing. And though the speed for the finale initially seems absurdly fast, it's actually not absurdly fast. The fantasy behind Beethoven's working of the Prometheus theme comes out anew, culminating in a clearer contrast than usual when the adagio enters. The one moment of pomposity in the whole performance is on the reprise of the Prometheus tune on the bass, brass, in that slow section. And in context, that sets the seal on the whole performance. In other words, a little bit of grandeur makes the diminutive, whatever that word is, the miserably underplayed quality of the rest. It justifies it somehow. The logic eludes me. Playing is superb. No doubt these players generally have little chance to play this masterpiece and return to it as though to an old friend, and I note especially the glorious oboe playing. The recording is superb too, beautifully full and free, with plenty of atmosphere, but no masking of detail. I have listed no comparisons. Oh, that is critical malpractice. Even in a very long list, Marriner with a small m, he's not capitalized. I think that's probably appropriate in this context. Marriner's version is quite literally, for the reasons explained, incomparable. Oh my God. Anyway, so there you have the bullshit approach. And now let us talk about the reality. Awful, terrible, unidiomatic Beethoven. That is the truth. God's honest truth. Okay, the first and second symphonies are okay, but you know what you're going to get here. You're going to get Beethoven Mozartified, diminished, played with elegance and point. Yes, it has point. It's very pointy Beethoven, but with nothing like the necessary power and excitement. And what makes it all the more depressing, quite frankly, I mean, is that aside from the performances we've talked about, you've got, a pastoral symphony, which Marriner really ought to do well, which has a scene by the brook that is, oh my God, comatose. Other conductors have taken nearly 14 minutes to get through it, as Marriner does, but they do it with some amount of tension, of flow. I mean, it's a swamp. I mean, and the seventh, as you know, sounds like a dance in a nondescript town, according to Lebrecht, and that's a good thing. The eighth sounds like the eighth. It's in the same contest of the first and second. But, of course, the eighth, as we know, contains possibly the most exciting first movement recapitulation climax in all of Beethoven, and that goes for nothing. And then we get to the ninth. Yes, my friends, An awful, awful performance, which is made all the worse by the fact that Marriner attempts to do some grand things in the finale. I mean, the choral singing is quite good. He's got a great cast of soloists. I mean, who are the soloists here? Carita Matala and Sophie Fodd-Otter, Francisco Ariza and Samuel Ramey. And it's very, by the way, it's badly recorded. I mean, you don't hear any bass or bottom line in the sound. It's kind of muffled on top a little bit muted sounding. It's not open and fresh and clear and all of that nonsense. And the finale has absolutely no sense of culmination. And what makes it even more bizarre is that Marriner does like the big slowdown at the final choral apostrophe. That business. You want to hear them going for it. Crash, bang, and it just, it's just terrible. Absolutely awful. Now, the violin concertos. Yes, Kremer's was on CD. It does have the Schnittke cadenzas. His playing is a little bit rough and ready. It's nobody's favorite Beethoven. Iona Brown is better, but the entire interpretation and performance is blander. At least, Kremer has edge, which, you don't always want the Beethoven Violin Concerto, but it's there. Then you've got the best thing of all, which is the minuets and German dances and contra dances. And if you want to sum this whole thing up, you could say that Marriner plays the Beethoven symphonies like their minuets and German dances and contra dances, because that's the most exciting thing here. And if you want the symphonies played like Beethoven's German dances and contra dances, then you may want to hear this. Otherwise, you really ought to just take a pass. It is beyond dreadful and an embarrassment, quite frankly. I remember vividly when these things all came out on CD, by the way. I mean, I know exactly where I was. I was at Tower Records, Lincoln Center. And, the new stuff arrived. I was with the bunch of crazies who always waited for new releases. So we looked at the new release end caps, where all the stuff was. And they had the complete Marriner Beethoven cycle. So naturally, some of us not having heard, the LPs when they came out or the original CDs, we were very excited to hear the whole thing. And so we started playing it. Well, that cleared out the classical addicts pretty quickly. I mean, we could not believe just how boring it was. It was a shock. It was a terrible, terrible shock. And they couldn't sell them at all. Nobody wanted them. They sat there week after week after week until they collected them all and sent them back, which is what you should probably do if you ever are unfortunate enough to get this. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. And I hope you enjoyed this little disquisition into bullshit criticism versus reality. Take care.